Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Character Dive, a show where we analyze characters from various sources of media. Let's go! Let me introduce y'all to my favorite anime of all time, Yu Yu Hakusho. It's packed with action, suspense, romance, comedy. This anime has it all. If you haven't seen this anime before, you are missing out. After watching this video, go give it a watch. It's pretty good. I'm 100% positive that you'll like it. For this episode of the Character Dive, we're going to look into the mind of the main character. I present to you, Yusuke Urameshi. Yusuke is not your average anime protagonist. When we are introduced to him, we witness a scene where he is hit by a car. And yes, he died. Wow, what a great start. Not even 1 minute into the first episode and the protagonist is already dead. That's how you know this wasn't going to be your average anime. Although this was Yusuke making an attempt to protect a kid from getting hit by the car. Despite the fact that the car would have veered out of the way anyways, so it's technically for nothing. Anyways, our protagonist Yusuke is granted his life back through an ordeal of becoming a spirit detective. Through this wild journey, we see him hunt down demons, enter a martial arts tournament. All sorts of crazy and chaotic things happen. Out of all the protagonists from each anime that I've watched, Yusuke is the one that I can relate to the most. So let's take a dive into the mind of this character. Yusuke can be a bit of a hothead, short-tempered, quick to anger, but he's got a good heart deep down that tough exterior. A little bit of background on Yusuke. He's a high schooler that's been labeled as a delinquent. His superiors view him as a troublemaker, as he's often getting into physical altercations with people. Evident by his behavior, he's taken all this to heart, causing him to act up and reinforce the labels placed on him. As I had mentioned earlier, I could relate to Yusuke. I remember being at that age and having my teachers look at me as a problem. Granted, instead of being in physical altercations, it would be verbal altercations. Like Yusuke, at that same age, I didn't have many friends. So I can see why he acts up the way he does and chooses to be the lone wolf. But don't worry, this diamond in the rough shines in the end. It all started when he became a spirit detective. Becoming a spirit detective was a much needed change in Yusuke's life. But what is a spirit detective? It's basically a crime investigator, except you hunt for apparitions from the spirit world. To come to think of it, this is actually Yusuke's first job. He is only a young teenager after all. But is this a job that someone at such a young age should be doing? I'd say yes. It's a perfect job for an angsty teenager. The fact that he's short-tempered, he's not gonna think twice about taking on a bunch of demons. I mean, they are monsters after all. So why not? He can let his anger out and lash out on those demons. Let's talk about Yusuke's interactions with the demons. Yusuke doesn't take shit from anybody, not even demons. The demons in Yu Yu Hakusho are pretty wild. They piss Yusuke off, and then they get their ass cooked. Take Rondo for an example. Fuck this guy, he's an asshole. He tried to torture Kuwabara in front of Yusuke, and this got Yusuke's blood boiling. Thinking he can hide behind his little Caillou disguise, Yusuke was not having any of his bullshit. Next you got Suzaku, who tried to put Yusuke's hometown in danger. As soon as Yusuke sees Keiko in distress, this gets him all fired up. He started wilding on Suzaku. But that's just the beginning. The real shit starts within the Dark Tournament. Now Yusuke was just not having it. This dude stands center stage in a stadium full of demons, tells everybody to shut up. Shut and they all comply. This man's got balls of steel. Now I gotta take a moment to praise the amazingness of the Dark Tournament. This saga in the series is actually the reason why I love Yu Yu Hakusho so much. It's never a dull moment with the action and the carnage. The art direction, the voice acting, the music. I loved every single moment of it. Bringing it back to Yusuke, let's talk about a few highlights within the tournament. His fights against both Chu and Jin are probably the more innocent fights that he has within the entire series, considering that both opponents are in functional condition after the fight. Can't say the same for Dr. Ichigaki. Yusuke was wildin' on this guy. Pow! Pow! Bam! Bam! Although it is important for me to note that not all the demons in Yu Yu Hakusho are bad. Some of them become his friends. Take Kurama and Hiei for an example. They were originally targets for Yusuke to go after, but after coming to an understanding of one another, they found mutual respect for Yusuke. Now, we gotta talk about Toguro. Out of all the antagonists within Yu Yu Hakusho, Toguro has had the most impact on the story. Younger Toguro, I should say. There's two of them. For context, we have both younger Toguro and elder Toguro. Both characters are introduced during the fourth quarter of the Spirit Detective saga. When Yusuke has a standoff with younger Toguro at a construction site, he knew that he needed to sharpen up on his combat skills. His only hope for defeating him would be to take extra training from Genkai. We'll dive into that in a moment, as there's a lot to unpack. Back to Yusuke and Toguro, we could see the two of them anticipate each other's match. The two of them will occasionally taunt each other, whether it be Toguro signaling to Yusuke, or Yusuke flipping the bird. There's something about Yusuke giving Toguro the finger that's hilarious to me. Yusuke was clowning around with Toguro. However, this would all change after Genkai battles against Toguro. This battle would result in Genkai's death, which shook Yusuke to the core. Yusuke's fight against Toguro would become much more personal. Once both fighters stand toe-to-toe in the arena, the announcer gives the call, and we are treated to the greatest battle in the entire series. You know what's cool about this? There's a bit of a David and Goliath vibe going on. Could just be the size difference between them, but I'm liking it. Another thing I love about this fight scene is, look at the animation. Look how sharp the details are, the saturated color tones. This is the animation at its peak. I could watch this 100 times and never get tired of it. Not to sidetrack on y'all or anything, I just get so absorbed into the show. Back to the main subject, Yusuke and Toguro have a very strong dynamic between each other. However, there is one important detail that I cannot gloss over, which pretty much ties everything together. In the middle of their battle, Toguro attacks Kuwabara, leading Yusuke to believe that he's dead. Now check this out. Yusuke drops a lot of information about himself in this scene. He tells Toguro that he wanted to be like him, and that he actually looked up to him, seeing that Toguro doesn't let anyone get in his way, which is something that Yusuke wanted, or at least he thought, but he realized the repercussions of what it would cause. It's this moment where we see the true growth in Yusuke's character. He's no longer the bratty teenager who wants to be on top of the world, but a man who wants to stand by what's right, for his friends, for his loved ones. He understands that some actions in life will cost him things that he values the most. We still got a lot more ground to cover. Let's talk about Yusuke's relationships. Let's start with Kuwabara. Kuwabara is very important to Yusuke, and vice versa. At the beginning of the story, we see both Yusuke and Kuwabara butt heads with each other, in a one-sided rivalry, with Kuwabara seeing Yusuke as a competition, and Yusuke kinda seeing Kuwabara as a goofball. Despite this, Yusuke has a genuine care for Kuwabara, and at the same time, Yusuke holds a valuable place in Kuwabara's life. This is something we see in the first episode, where Kuwabara mourns over Yusuke's death. Big air quotes around that. This one scene alone is self-explanatory.
You're supposed to be here for me.
Speaking of death, let's talk about his connection with the Grim Reaper, that being Botan. Yo, I ain't even gonna lie. I mean, if the Grim Reaper looked that sexy, I don't even think dying would be a bad thing.
A pretty girl like you? Please, you're no Grim Reaper.
Well, I'm not sure if I should take that as a compliment or an insult.
Yusuke formed his connection with Botan during his time as a spirit detective. You could say that she's his guardian angel. Kind of like a second parent, making sure that he stays out of trouble. Speaking of parents, let's talk about his relationship with his mom for a moment. Right in the first episode, we could see that she's not doing so well, as it's clear she's an alcoholic. We can also see that Yusuke's father is not present. That alone is self-explanatory as to why Yusuke was the way he was at the beginning of the series. Without the father being there, there's no one to discipline him or teach him self-regulation. With the mother being emotionally absent, Yusuke wasn't getting the love that he needed. It's really sad when you think about it. You would get the impression that his mother doesn't care. But when we see her at Yusuke's funeral, she breaks down. We see how much she truly cared about him. But what about his teachers? He's in school, right? Wouldn't they play an important role in this story? Nah, not really. They're just side characters.
We should be glad. After a life of being worthless, Yusuke did something to give our school a good reputation.
Tell me why these guys have to show up at the man's funeral and disrespect him like that. Anyways, let's talk about who truly matters to Yusuke. Keiko. Y'all know what time it is. We about to get romantic up in this episode. The interactions between Yusuke and Keiko give us a nice clean break from the action. The playful banter between the two of them is always fun to watch. This is gonna be a huge stretch, but I think this is the most realistic couple that I've seen in a shonen anime. No, for real, I'm actually being serious. Hear me out on this. It's two childhood friends who interact with each other and allow their relationship to grow over time. They don't have high expectations out of each other and just go with the flow of things. The friendship grows stronger as they age. And once they've grown older and matured, they commit to each other. Y'all should know that Yusuke dropped that proposal to Keiko. Now what about his sensei, Genkai? This is probably the most strongest relationship Yusuke has in the series. It all started with an invitation for him to become her next apprentice. It was a rough road for Yusuke to endure such harsh training and a lot of pain, especially the part of the training where he's forced to have that orb inside of him. Of course, Yusuke was irritated with Genkai through most of this.
I passed the test with flying colors. Now get this crap off me.
You will keep that crap on you at all times.
But after Genkai's life was taken, Yusuke saw the value in all this training. Genkai's death is very important to Yusuke's story arc, because it's where we see Yusuke at his lowest. We can see that he's completely broken by this. Proof of this is that he refused to tell anyone about Genkai's death, as if talking about it would weaken his spirit. You can't blame him. Having your sensei die in your arms at that age, that can be traumatizing for anyone. On a good note, when Genkai is brought back, we could see Yusuke rejoice in her return. I could go further, but you get the idea. All the other characters such as Koenma, Yukina, and all the fighters at the Dark Tournament are pretty self-explanatory. It's tough to squeeze 112 episodes worth of information into one video. Now, this will be the first time I do this on the character dive. I'm going to conclude this video here, and we will continue the analysis in the second part, where we will cover the Chapter Black Saga and the Three Kings Saga. Stay tuned, and I will see you in the next episode of the Character Dive.